While poking around on the internet to learn more about the American F-4S Phantom, I somehow ended up reading an article about the Su-27's use in Ukraine by both Russia and Ukraine. If you don't know yet, the Su-27 is a Soviet supersonic fighter aircraft. It was designed as a competitor to the American F-14 Tomcat and the McDonnell F-15 Eagle. The article I read was from the Smithsonian magazine, a magazine which focuses mainly on research and education on science and nature. Now, the reason I mention this is because there are some very interesting interviews with Ukrainian pilots who operated the Su-27, and they have a lot of interesting things to say about it. What they said was more surprising for me actually, considering the current situation between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. But anyways, I'm just going to read the interviews to you, and you can just sit back and watch the gameplay while listening, or you can just do whatever you like really. There's not going to be much commentary from my side. But let's not forget the intro. Hello and welcome to the Bobby and Tanks YouTube channel, and enjoy this video, but not about tanks this time. Retired Major General Vladimir Alexeyev, former head of Combat Training Directorate, says, I received theoretical instruction on the Su-27 in spring 1990 and started flying flankers at Mirhorod that summer. Something which really gave me a positive impression of the flanker was its jaw-dropping thrust-to-weight ratio. I was also surprised by the exceptional view from the cockpit. When I first rolled an Su-27, I felt as if I was going to fall out of the cockpit. Another surprise was the ease of flying. The new fly-by-wire controls gave the impression that you just think of doing something and the airplane does it as if of its own accord. The flanker's speed and acceleration are good, but there is one bad side effect. Once you exceed 850 to 900 km per hour in a twin-seat flanker, or 900 km per hour in a single-seat version, the cockpit noise increases with the increase in speed. This is because of the bubble canopy. The disturbed airflow behind the canopy creates a crashing sound. It would sometimes get so loud at speeds in excess of 1100 km per hour that you couldn't hear the radio. In March 1997, I demonstrated the Su-27 in flight for US Air Force General Mike Ryan, at that time commander of US Air Forces in Europe and later US Air Force Chief of Staff. After the takeoff, I gave him the controls and he immediately pulled 7 Gs. He wanted to see how quickly the flanker pulls up. The Eagle is a little wooden when pulling up, a little slow. The general wanted to compare and pulled the stick back quickly as you do in an F-15. The flanker immediately pulled up, almost vertically. Mike Ryan didn't expect that he would pull so many Gs when doing that, because he was flying like in an F-15 with quick, wide stick movements which you can use in the very stable Eagle. He reacted very well, pushed the stick forward immediately. When we met in the States the following year, he told me he was surprised by how well and big the powerful flanker maneuvered. Colonel Yuli Bulavka, Deputy Commander for Pilot Training of the 831st Galatska Tactical Aviation Brigade. During the second year of junior high, I decided I would be a fighter pilot. I looked at videos of famous Soviet flanker test pilots, Anatoly Kvochur and Viktor Pugachev, but never imagined that I would fly the Su-27 myself. I first flew in an Su-27 UB twin-seat combat trainer in fall 2004. However, because of a fuel shortage in the Air Force at that time, it wasn't until 22nd April 2007 that I first flew in a single-seat Su-27. It accelerates faster than the twin-seater and is more powerful. The most difficult part of that flight was the landing. Nobody was there to assist and monitor me from the rear cockpit, and that was unnerving. We often flew against the MiG-29 during exercises. It was really interesting to observe how fighters of two very different categories compare. The fulcrum is light and small, and our flanker is considerably bigger. The fulcrum is good in the vertical plane. It can jump to a higher altitude quickly. The flanker has more powerful engines, but it is also heavier. The flanker's advantage is that it can drag the fulcrum into horizontal oblique maneuvers, and conduct these at high angles of attack and speeds with which the fulcrum pilots simply won't be able to cope for long. For example, the same maneuver might require a pilot to pull 5 Gs in a flanker but requires 7 Gs in a fulcrum. However, altitude was an important additional factor. The Su-27 is more nimble at sea level and medium altitude than it is above 8,000 meters, while the MiG-29 is better at higher altitude. The maneuvering capabilities of the flanker are excellent, of course. For example, during air combat maneuvering training at the Clear Sky 2018 exercises with the F-15 Sea Eagles of the 144th Fighter Wing of the California Air National Guard, we won in 3 out of 4 engagements. Naturally, you need to survive long enough to close to visual range because the Eagles' electronic equipment and armament are much better. Ukraine has factories that manufactures air-to-air missiles, but we are not quite at the level of modern technology. We need fire-and-forget missiles because illuminating a target with your radar after launch with semi-active radar homing is now a relic of the past. The Russians have the R-77 missile with active homing, but our R-27 is still semi-active. A significant advantage of the flanker is its long range. It is as if we were carrying extra fuel tanks, but internally rather than under the wings. This allows us to carry more weapons under the wing hardpoints. Colonel Alexander Oksanchenko, retired, former deputy commander for pilot training of the 831st Galatska Tactical Aviation Brigade. I finished the Kharkiv Military Pilot School in 1989 and remained there as an instructor on the L-39 aircraft until 1995. Once, an Su-27 twin-seater overflew our airfield on a weather reconnaissance flight. The crew performed a pull-up at low altitude and it captivated us. I did not think then that I would fly a flanker. Then, in October 1996, I was transferred to the 831st Regiment and from 1997 flew the Su-27. My first solo on an Su-27 took place on May 15, 1998. It was a difficult time for the Air Force and we flew very little. That didn't prevent me from gaining a distinct first impression of the flanker. It's powerful and accelerates well, especially on takeoff. The flanker is very sensitive in the rolling plane. You pull the stick to the side just a little and it already wants to perform a barrel roll. When you pull up vertically, the Su-27 zooms across the sky because of the great amount of available thrust. Once the Air Force training budget increased, we strafed real ground targets and launched live missiles. I got a surprise when firing the cannon the first time. The recoil is really strong, the equivalent of 7 tons as it says in the technical manual. The rear view windows in the cockpit twisted out of position while the plastic holders for various information sheets started flying around in the cockpit. That's not pleasant at all. Sometimes firing the gun even caused some radio systems to fail. Not all the flights were uneventful. Once, during a training combat against another Su-27, an AC generator failed on my aircraft. I switched to the second generator, but it cut out due to the high load. All the aircraft systems, including the fly-by-wire controls, weapons management and gun sight, were switched on. Once such a failure happens, the remaining flight time is just 10 minutes. As the voltage in the onboard electrical circuits is maintained only by the batteries. I rapidly returned to home base from a distance of 40 kilometers and landed successfully. The engineer then told me, "You were lucky, the batteries were new." That was the most dangerous failure I ever experienced. Colonel Dmitry Fisher, retired, former squadron commander of the 831st Galatska Tactical Aviation Brigade. Back when I was in Chernihiv flight school, I wanted to become a flanker pilot. It so happens that in the 1990s, the flight school restarted training on 4th generation combat aircraft and we began studying the MiG-29. My goal was the flanker though, and I deliberately went to the Su-27 base at Mirhorod before our assignments were announced to get a personnel request letter from the unit. Eventually, I was assigned to the unit as soon as I finished flight school in 1994. The flanker is very sensitive to control inputs. The control surfaces move just a little, not nearly as far as on the L-39. The first flight felt like sitting on the end of a needle. The other impression is the great view. The flanker's nose is canted down compared with third-generation aircraft. Sometimes young pilots are so affected by this that they try to level out the aircraft and so raise the nose. During the war with Russia, I intercepted a Russian IL-20 electronic intelligence turboprop in the area to the south of Donetsk. I did not approach within visual range, but according to my onboard systems, it violated our airspace. I had locked onto it and I could launch a missile, but I was given a weapons-tied order. It wasn't worth it. The Russians could have used this border violation and its consequences as a pretext for full-scale war. That wasn't the only unfriendly case. On several occasions, we trapped Russian fighters with our radar on their side of the border. For example, when our AN-26 made supply drops for our border guards, encircled by Russian-controlled forces in Krasnodon, the Russians would scramble their fighters every time. There is a reason to suspect that one of the Antonovs was shot down by an air-to-air missile launched from Russian territory. Our presence deters them, to a degree. We had quite a few incidents because the first production series aircraft, which the 831st Regiment had received, had plenty of factory defects. The most serious issues that I experienced were with the hydraulics and engine oil system. Sometimes I had to land on one engine. Once the hydraulics just blew out completely. The hydraulic fluid entered the fuel system and I was 3 or so minutes away from having to pull the head and eject. The maintainers told me this later when they poured the fuel out of the aircraft and saw that it had turned red. I flew during Safe Skies 2011, both escort missions and air combat training against F-16s. The dogfights with the F-16s were predominantly 2 versus 2. The flanker was superior in visual range combat, but you've got to keep in mind that the flanker and the F-16 belong to different categories of fighters. The flanker is more powerful, but there is another side to the coin. I took a flight in the F-16 and realized that our systems are long obsolete. That's why the F-16 is superior in beyond visual range combat. I can't get information about the tactical situation in the flanker because it was designed on the principle that it would be supplied with tactical information from ground control stations. With those stations available, I would see the information on my cockpit display. Now the systems no longer exist and the only way I can get tactical updates is by voice radio from the ground control officer. The F-16 is completely different. They have a tactical information display and they see each other even without making electronic emissions, such as switching on radar. Colonel Sergei Zurovlev, retired, former senior inspector pilot of the Combat Training Directorate. I graduated from Chernihiv Military Aviation School in 1985. I was assigned to serve on the MiG-23 with the 868th Fighter Regiment in Starokonstantinov. Just after we reported, we happened to visit the 831st Regiment at Mirhorod. We asked to take a look at the aircraft it was flying, and they agreed, but warned us, don't come too close, the aircraft is secret. We didn't go farther than the smoking area. That's about 100 meters from the aircraft. Until then, we had only seen images of the flanker and now it was already flying there. Sometime later, I was lucky to become part of an experiment. 4 lieutenants, myself included, all with a 3rd class rating, were chosen and sent to Lipetsk in Russia to convert to the flanker. We got to Lipetsk, the Soviet Air Force Combat Training Center, at the end of 1986. As soon as we got there, they told us, we'll show you a MiG-29 and Su-27 display today, so that you will see just what you will have a chance to fly. A lot of people from different regiments lined up along the runway. Well, they got a show they won't forget. A MiG-29 took off, pulled up into a loop right on takeoff. He crashed right next to the runway with all his fuel on board. Burning fuel spilled from the aircraft. There were many dead, many others badly burned. We 4 were lucky, even though we were very close. I got the chance to fly an F-15E once, following the transatlantic transit flight of Su-27s in Mirhorod to Seymour Johnson. This is an Air Force base in North Carolina in 1998. I remember clearly how long the pre-flight check took us. For us, you jump into the cockpit, start the engines, and then you are away in 5 minutes. In the F-15, we sat there for 20 minutes just to check the systems. We sat there, then some kind of onboard failure was discovered and we switched to another fighter, which was checked for a similar amount of time. Over the range, the US pilot took his hands off the control. Do what you want. First he showed me maneuvers, then I controlled the aircraft and repeated them. We communicated mostly by signs. The language barrier didn't allow for more back then. Overall, the F-15 is softer. You pull the stick and it goes smoothly in that direction. and the flanker, you can achieve great vertical speeds and angles of attack. In the turn, the Su-27 is also more maneuverable. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right, or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.
Пуск разрешен.